What happens when the ultimate betrayal happens in front of the whole world? He was Julian Vance, a New York real estate billionaire. She was his silent, beautiful wife, Emma. But at the city's most watched charity ball, Julian didn't just ignore his wife. He publicly, passionately kissed his new mistress, Sophia, for every camera to see. The humiliation was total. The world watched Emma's life crumble, but they all forgot one crucial detail, a secret Emma had kept for 10 years. Julian may have run the company, but Emma owned it. And the gavel was about to come down. The ballroom at the Pierre Hotel was suffocating. It wasn't the heat, the air conditioning was a precise, Arctic chill that carried the scent of 1,000 white roses. It was the weight of the diamond necklace, a generous anniversary gift from Julian, which felt more like a beautiful, glittering leash. The weight of the custom-made, midnight blue Carolina Herrera gown, a color Julian had called subtle and appropriate. And most of all, the weight of being Mrs. Emma Vance. Emma Vance was, to the world, the luckiest woman in New York. A decade ago, she was a quiet, bookish nobody. Then she'd captured the attention of Julian Vance, the most ambitious, charismatic, and ruthless real estate developer in the city. He had built Vance Capital from nothing, a story he told often, into a $10 billion empire. Emma, with her quiet grace and whisper-thin figure, was the perfect accessory. She chaired the right charities, spoke only when spoken to, and looked exquisite on his arm. Tonight was the annual Metropolitan Children's Fund Gala. It was, in theory, Emma's event. She was the chairwoman. But as Julian took the stage, the spotlight followed him, as if drawn by a magnet. "We all have a duty," Julian boomed, his voice like polished steel filling the room. He flashed his famous predatory smile. "A duty to build, a duty to succeed, and when you succeed, a duty to give back." The room, filled with New York's old money and new tech, erupted in applause. Emma clapped softly, her smile as practiced and perfect as the pearls on the woman next to her. She watched her husband. He was a magnificent creature, all sharp angles, expensive tailoring, and blinding confidence. He looked every bit the king of the city. But kings get careless. Emma had felt the shift 6 months ago. It wasn't a sudden storm. It was a change in the air, a drop in barometric pressure. It was the way Julian suddenly started guarding his phone, angling the screen away from her even though she'd never shown the slightest interest in it. It was the new, unfamiliar scent on his cashmere sweaters. Not her perfume, but something musky, expensive, and invasive. It was the whispers. "He's a titan," a voice drifted over from a nearby table, where a skeletal socialite was leaning into a gossip columnist. "But that new VP of his, Sophia Dubois, she's the one with the killer instinct. They say she's the reason they closed the Hudson Yards deal." "They say a lot of things about her," the columnist purred, his eyes finding Julian on stage. "She's brilliant and devastating." Emma's hand, resting on the white linen tablecloth, tightened. Sophia Dubois. The name had been a constant in her house for months. Sophia closed the deal. Sophia reorganized the marketing division. Sophia works as hard as I do. Emma had done her own, quiet research. Sophia was indeed devastating. She was a tall, flame-haired Wharton graduate with a social media presence as sharp and curated as her cheekbones. Her feed was a mix of brutalist architecture, high fashion, and just enough candid shots in the Vance Capital boardroom to signal her importance. Julian finished his speech, and the applause was deafening. He descended the stage, not walking back to Emma's table, but being intercepted, absorbed by a crowd of admirers. Emma watched him laugh, that big, performative laugh, and clap a rival developer on the back. Her phone vibrated silently in her clutch. A simple one-line text from a number saved as AG. The accounts are balanced. The Event Horizon provision is confirmed secure. Emma read the message once. A single, almost imperceptible breath left her. She typed a one-word reply. Acknowledged. She looked up. Across the ballroom, Julian had finally found his way to Sophia Dubois. Sophia, in a daring, crimson gown that left nothing to the imagination, was looking up at him, not as an employee, but as a predator sizing up prey. She laughed, touching his forearm. It was a gesture of casual intimacy that screamed possession. Emma picked up her water glass, the crystal cool against her skin. The weight of her dress, the diamonds, the name. It was all still there. But it was no longer a cage. It was armor. She was the quiet wife, the subtle accessory, the woman who was never, ever a threat. And as she watched her husband and his mistress hold court in the center of the room, Emma Vance realized, with a chilling calm, that they had all made a terrible, terrible mistake. They thought she was just the wife of the man who ran the company. They had no idea that she was the woman who owned it. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in subtle psychological warfare. The event Julian and Sophia were circling wasn't some hidden, sordid affair. It was the Vance Capital 10th Anniversary Innovation Ball. It was, by all accounts, Julian's masterpiece. He was planning to unveil his legacy project, a multi-billion-dollar smart city complex that would redefine the New York skyline. It was his name on the invitations, his face on the cover of Forbes that month, anticipating the announcement. Emma's preparations were quieter. "Mr. Graves," she said, her voice soft in the soundproofed study of her private Upper East Side brownstone, a property Julian didn't even know she owned. This wasn't their shared penthouse. This was her sanctuary, her real office. Arthur Graves, A.G., was a man who seemed to be carved from granite. He had been her father's chief counsel, and now he was hers. He was the only person alive who knew the full truth. "Emma," he replied, his voice a gravelly monotone. He never called her Mrs. Vance. "The board of Ethelred Holdings is concerned." "Ethelred Holdings is me, Arthur," Emma said, turning from the window. "And I am concerned. But not about the stock price. I'm concerned about the rot. The rot, Mr. Vance, is about to announce the legacy project," Graves said, adjusting his glasses. "A project funded entirely by Ethelred, funneled through 3 shell corporations, and presented as his own. If he craters, we take the hit." "He is going to crater," Emma said. "He's arrogant, he's sloppy, and he's in love, or whatever he calls it, with a woman who is just as arrogant and sloppy as he's become. He thinks he's the sun, and he's about to fly right into it." "So what do we do?" Arthur asked. "We do nothing," Emma said. We let him fly. We let him reach for the sky. And when he's at the very, very peak, I will hand him the bill for the wax." She turned back to the window. "I need you to be ready, Arthur. The Event Horizon protocol. I want it loaded. I want the termination for cause documents drawn up. I want the asset seizure warrants filed and sealed, ready to be executed on my command." "That's scorched earth, Emma," Graves said, the closest he'd ever come to surprise. "That's what's left after a wildfire, Arthur," she replied, "and I am standing in the ashes." At their penthouse, the glass and chrome box Julian called home, the tension was thick enough to cut. "The Innovation Ball is everything, Emma," Julian said, pacing in front of his closet, which was the size of a studio apartment. He was already in his tuxedo shirt, the diamond studs winking. "This isn't one of your charity things. This is legacy." I'm aware, Julian, you've mentioned it. Emma was at her own vanity, applying a neutral, unassuming lipstick. I need you. Polished tonight, he said, not looking at her. Simple. Elegant. The board from Tokyo is flying in. The mayor will be there. I don't want distractions. Distractions, she repeated, her voice flat. Yes, just be the perfect hostess. Smile, shake hands, and let me handle the important conversations. He finally turned, his eyes landing on her. And wear the blue. The one I like. The blue, she said. Yes. Not that loud red thing you bought last week. Emma's gaze was unblinking. I didn't buy a red dress, Julian. He frowned, annoyed. Whatever, just be ready. The car is here in 20. He swept out of the room, already on his phone. Sophia, make sure the press packets have the new rendering. Emma stared at her reflection. She hadn't bought a red dress, but she knew, with the certainty of the sun rising, who had. She picked up her phone and sent a new text to Arthur Graves. Add Sophia Dubois to the termination protocol. Cause, conspiracy to defraud a primary stakeholder. Acknowledged. Emma stood up. She looked at the midnight blue dress Julian had laid out for her. Then she walked to the back of her closet, to a garment bag she had picked up that afternoon. Julian wanted simple. He wanted subtle. He wanted his wife to be a shadow. She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress the color of ice, a blinding, glittering, custom-made Oscar de la Renta that didn't just enter a room, it conquered it. He wants a distraction, she whispered to her reflection. He's about to get one. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Great Hall, usually reserved for ancient relics, was now a monument to modern ego. Giant screens projections of Vance Capital swept across the Egyptian temple walls. The air thrummed with a string quartet playing a modern, edgy rendition of a Vivaldi concerto. When Julian and Emma Vance arrived, a phalanx of paparazzi exploded in a blinding wall of light. Julian, as always, soaked it in. He put his arm around Emma's waist, a possessive, proprietary gesture. But the narrative shifted. The whispers from the press line were different tonight. It's Emma! Mrs. Vance! Look at that dress! Emma, in her ice-white, shimmering gown, looked less like a shadow and more like a queen. The diamonds at her throat weren't a leash. They were a warning. She smiled, a small, knowing smile, and let Julian guide her inside, but she was the one they were all watching. Julian felt it. He gripped her waist tighter, his smile stiffening. That's quite the dress, Emma. A bit much, don't you think? Is it? She murmured, detaching herself from his grasp to take a champagne flute from a passing waiter. I felt it was appropriate for an anniversary. She drifted into the crowd, a vision in white, leaving him standing at the entrance, frowning. The party was a sea of Julian's success. The mayor was there, as promised. The investors from Tokyo, reserved and watchful. And then there was Sophia Dubois. She had, indeed, worn red. It was a staggering, audacious, blood-red column of silk that was practically painted on. Her flame-colored hair was slicked back, her lips painted the same, shocking red. She was a declaration of war, and she was standing next to Julian's legacy project model, holding court as if she were the hostess. Emma watched from a distance. She saw the glances, the whispers, the way Julian and Sophia kept finding each other, their bodies aligned, their heads bent together. They were a power couple, radiating energy, and Emma was, once again, relegated to the role of the wife. The time came for the main event. Julian mounted the custom-built stage, the applause thundering. "Tonight," he began, his voice emotional, We're not just celebrating 10 years of success. We're celebrating the future, a future I built. Emma, standing near the back, felt a coldness creep into her veins. A future I built. I couldn't have done it alone, Julian continued. He thanked the mayor. He thanked the board. And then he smiled, his gaze locking on the red dress in the front row. But vision is nothing without a catalyst, without someone who shares that fire, someone who sees the world the way you do. Please join me in thanking the brilliant, the visionary, Ms. Sophia Dubois. The spotlight swung to Sophia. She looked triumphant. She walked toward the stage. And then the unthinkable happened. It wasn't a handshake. It wasn't a polite hug. Julian, high on his own ego and the roar of the crowd, reached down. Sophia, her eyes locked on his, met him at the steps. In front of 200 guests, the mayor of New York, the international press, and his wife. Julian Vance pulled Sophia Dubois into his arms and kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It was a deep, passionate, Hollywood-level kiss. The flashbulbs didn't just pop. They exploded. The room went utterly silent. The only sound, the click, click, click of a dozen cameras capturing the moment. Emma didn't move. She didn't gasp. She didn't faint. She simply stood, her face a pale, beautiful mask, and watched. She watched the man she had once loved, the man she had created, publicly and brutally humiliate her. She saw Sophia's hand snake around Julian's neck, a gesture of pure, triumphant possession. A single reporter, braver than the rest, turned his camera from the stage to Emma. The flash was blinding. He captured the image that would be on the cover of the Post the next day. The perfect, ice-cold wife, watching her own life detonate. The kiss ended. Julian, dazed, looked out at the silent crowd. Sophia, her lipstick barely smeared, looked directly, intentionally at Emma. It was a smile of pure victory. Emma held her gaze. Then, with a calm that was more terrifying than any scream, Emma Vance set her champagne flute down on a waiter's tray, turned, and walked out of the great hall. She didn't run. She walked. Every step was measured, her back ramrod straight. The perfect wife had left the building. Julian didn't come home. The digital clock on Emma's nightstand flipped to 4:17 a.m. The silence of the penthouse was absolute. The ice dress was puddled on the floor of her dressing room, a glittering snakeskin she had shed. Emma was in a simple, grey silk robe, sitting in the dark, looking out over the city that never slept. Her city. Her phone, which had been vibrating incessantly for hours with texts from concerned friends and calls from Julian, which she'd silenced, lit up with a single message from Arthur Graves. "Are you all right?" It was the most personal thing he'd ever asked her. He kissed her, in front of everyone. The Post is already online. "The Vance and the Vamp." A moment later, Graves replied, "The protocol. Is it engaged?" Emma's thumb hovered over the screen. This was the final button. There was no going back from this. She thought of the 10 years of work, of building Julian up, of believing in the man he could be. She thought of the look on Sophia's face, that smug, reptilian victory. She thought of the kiss, the arrogance, the public execution. "Engage it," she typed. "Full event horizon. Seize the assets. Freeze the accounts. Terminate the leases. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning with nothing but his arrogance." "It will be done," Graves replied. "The board of Ethelred meets at 9:10 a.m. They will ratify the vote. Security has been dispatched to the Vance Capital headquarters. They will secure the servers by 6 a.m. "And Arthur," Emma typed. "Yes? Make sure they change the locks on the executive washroom." Emma turned off the phone. She felt nothing. Not sadness, not even anger. Just a profound, cold emptiness that was rapidly filling with resolve. The sun was just breaking over the East River when the penthouse door finally hissed open. Julian stumbled in, his tuxedo tie undone, his hair a mess. He stank of Sophia's perfume. He saw Emma sitting in the dim morning light, and he actually, visibly, flinched. The bravado of the night before was gone, replaced by a pasty, hungover fear. "Emma," he started, his voice hoarse. "Look, about last night." "Don't," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. It happened so fast. The energy, the crowd, Sophia. "Her name," Emma said, standing up, "is the last thing I ever want to hear you say." "Emma, listen to me." He tried to grab her arm, his old, bullish tactic. She stepped back, and his hand fell on empty air. "You have to understand. This is passion. This is real. What you and I have, it's comfortable, it's a partnership, but this—" "A partnership," she repeated, nodding slowly. "Yes, that's what we were." A wave of relief washed over his face. He mistook her calm for weakness, for acceptance. "Exactly. And I'll take care of you. I'm not a monster. You'll get the penthouse, the Hamptons house. A very, very generous allowance. You'll never have to work a day in your life." He was already dividing the assets, assuming they were his to divide. "You're giving me the penthouse?" she asked, tilting her head. "Of course. And the driver. Just don't fight me on this, Emma. Don't make it ugly. My lawyers will draft the papers. We can call it irreconcilable differences. It'll be clean." "My lawyer," Emma said, walking toward her dressing room, "is Arthur Graves." Julian laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Graves? Your father's old probate lawyer? Emma, don't be naive. He's a fossil. He's no match for my team. He'll be eaten alive. Just take the deal." Emma paused at the doorway. She looked back at him, at the King of New York, standing in her living room, his shirt stained with another woman's lipstick. "You're right, Julian," she said softly. "He's not your lawyer's match. He's so far above them. They're not even in the same game." She closed the door. He heard the click of the lock. Julian, annoyed but relieved, poured himself a stiff bourbon. He thought the worst was over. He thought he had won. He called his head of security. "Yeah, Mark, I'm going to be working from home today. Lock down the executive floor. I don't want anyone bothering me. Except Ms. Dubois, of course. Let her up." There was a pause. Mr. Vance?" "What?" Julian snapped. My keycard isn't working." "What do you mean it's not working? It's a gold-level pass." "No, sir. I mean, the building isn't working. There are men here, in suits. They're not our guys. They're Ethelred holding security. They're changing the locks, sir." Julian's blood ran cold. "Ethelred, the holding company. Why are they— Get them on the phone. Get their man in charge on the phone right now." To understand the beauty of what was happening at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, you have to understand the lie Julian Vance had been living for 10 years. Emma's father, Arthur Blackwood, had not been a probate lawyer. He had been a phantom, a quiet, unassuming tech and real estate genius who founded Ethelred Holdings in the 1980s. He bought land, patents, and entire city blocks, then hid them behind layers of LLCs and trusts. He hated the spotlight. When he died, he left his only child, Emma, not just a fortune, but an empire. Emma, then 23, had a choice. She could have become the billionaire heiress on the cover of magazines. But she was her father's daughter. She wanted a low profile, and she wanted a partner, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her. She met Julian Vance when he was a junior analyst with a lot of charm and a failing startup. He had no idea who she was. He just saw a beautiful, quiet woman. She saw his raw ambition and his hunger. She decided to run an experiment. She gave him a seed loan. Family money, she'd called it. She let him found Vance Capital. What he never knew was that the company was founded as a 100% majority-owned subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. He was never the owner. He was never the founder. He was and had always been the CEO, an employee. Every brilliant deal he'd closed, it was Ethelred's money. Every building he'd acquired, it was Ethelred's property, leased back to Vance Capital at a friendly rate. His entire empire, his name on the building, his private jet, his legacy project, was all built on a foundation owned by the woman he'd just told to take the penthouse. And the prenup. Julian had insisted on one, to protect his future wealth. Emma's lawyers, led by Arthur Graves, chief counsel of Ethelred, were only too happy to draft it. It was an ironclad document that stated in no uncertain terms that in the event of a divorce, all assets acquired before and during the marriage would be divided based on verified original ownership. Julian had signed it with a smirk, thinking he was protecting himself from a gold digger. He had just signed his own death warrant. The Event Horizon Protocol was a tiny buried clause in Julian's 200-page CEO employment contract, a contract he'd been too arrogant to read. It stated that if the CEO, Julian, committed any act of gross public misconduct or moral turpitude that threatened the reputation of the parent company, Ethelred, the board could terminate his contract for cause, effective immediately. Forfeiture for cause meant he'd lost everything: salary, bonuses, severance, and, most importantly, his non-vested stock options. The public, passionate kiss with an employee at a company-sponsored event, which was now on the cover of every newspaper in the Western world. That, Arthur Graves would argue, was the very definition of gross public misconduct. The 9:00 a.m. board meeting wasn't a meeting. It was a formality. It consisted of Emma as sole stakeholder, signing a single document presented by Arthur Graves. I, Emma Blackwood Vance, chairwoman and sole owner of Ethelred Holdings, do hereby ratify the termination of Julian Vance, CEO of the subsidiary Vance Capital, for cause, effective immediately. The empire fell with the scratch of a pen. Julian was in a full-blown panic. His phone was a brick. His email had bounced back with a user unknown error. The private elevator to his office? Access denied. He had actually taken a taxi, to the Vance Capital Tower, the glass and steel monument to his own ego. He stormed into the lobby, his face crimson. "I am Julian Vance. You will let me up to my office," he roared at the new security guards in the lobby. They were big, calm men, with Ethelred on their lapels. "Mr. Vance, sir, your name is not on the access list," the lead guard said, his voice polite but final. "I am the access list," Julian bellowed. "No, sir, you are not." Just then, the elevator doors chimed. Sophia Dubois arrived, looking flustered but triumphant. She was wearing a sharp white power suit, ready for her first day as the unofficial new Mrs. Vance. "Julian, darling, what's going on? My driver's corporate card was declined," she said, annoyance in her voice. Then she saw the guards. "What is this?" "These thugs won't let me up to my own office," Julian said, grabbing her arm. "Don't be ridiculous," Sophia scoffed. She marched to the lead guard. "I am Sophia Dubois, Executive Vice President. These guards are fired. Call your supervisor. Now." The guard looked at a tablet in his hand. "Ah, yes. Ms. Dubois. We have a packet for you." He handed her a simple manila envelope. Sophia ripped it open, a smug look on her face. Her expression changed as she read. Her face went from smug to confused, then to ashen white. Inside was a single-page letter. It informed her that her employment with Vance Capital was terminated, effective immediately, for violations of the company's code of conduct and conspiracy to defraud. It also informed her that the company-leased apartment she lived in would need to be vacated in 24 hours. A bill for misappropriated corporate assets, including designer clothing, flights, and the red dress she'd worn last night, all charged to the company Amex, was attached. This is a joke," she whispered, the paper trembling in her hand. "Julian, what is this? What is Ethelred?" Julian was saying, his voice cracking. "They're just our silent partners. They're a holding company. They can't do this." "Actually," a voice said, "they can." Arthur Graves walked through the lobby doors, flanked by 2 more Ethelred guards. He looked like a very distinguished, very expensive undertaker. "Mr. Vance, Miss Dubois," Graves said, his voice flat. "You are trespassing on private property." "Private property!" Julian shrieked. "This is my building. I built this." "No, Mr. Vane," Graves corrected him. "You were employed in this building, a building owned by Ethelred Holdings. As of 9:01 a.m. this morning, your employment, and that of Miss Dubois, was terminated. For cause." The "for cause" hit Julian like a physical blow. You can't. The board will never approve this. I am the board." "You were the chairman of the subsidiary board, Mr. Vance," Graves said, checking his watch. "A board that was dissolved by its sole shareholder this morning. Security will now escort you both off the premises. Any attempt to re-enter will be unfortunate." The guard stepped forward. "No!" Sophia suddenly found her voice. It was raw and ugly. "You can't. Julian is the most powerful man in this city. He'll sue you. He'll sue Ethelred. We'll own that company." Julian, for the first time, looked utterly defeated. He knew, deep down, the power of Ethelred. He had just never known who they were. "Who?" he whispered, looking at Graves. Who is Ethelred? Who did this?" Arthur Graves looked past Julian, toward the main entrance. The glass doors swished open. "I did." Emma Vance walked into the lobby. The transformation was absolute. The ice dress from last night was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp, custom black Tom Ford pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, powerful chignon. Her face was pale, composed, and utterly terrifying in its calmness. She wasn't Mrs. Vance. She was Emma Blackwood. She was flanked by her own security team. Julian's jaw went slack. The blood drained from his face. He looked from Emma to Arthur Graves, and back to Emma. The math, as simple as it was devastating, was finally adding up in his head. "Emma," he said. His voice was a pathetic croak. Sophia, however, was still in fight mode. "Oh, look," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "The wronged wife came to cry. Did you come to beg for your allowance, darling? I'm afraid Julian and I are liquidating." Emma didn't even look at her. Her eyes were locked on Julian. "You," Julian whispered, pointing a shaking finger. It was you. Your father. Probate." "My father," Emma said, her voice clear and cold, echoing in the marble lobby, "was Arthur Blackwood, founder and sole owner of Ethelred Holdings, and as his sole heir, I am Ethelred Holdings." The confession hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. Sophia's face crumpled. No, that's not possible. "I own this building," Emma continued, taking a step forward. Julian took a step back. I own the land it's built on. I own the chair in your office, the jet you flew in last week, and the watch on your wrist. All of it. Property of Ethelred, leased to a CEO who was too arrogant to read his own contract. Julian was hyperventilating. The prenup. The prenup. Emma almost smiled. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Arthur, did you bring the prenup? Graves stepped forward and produced the document. It's quite clear, Mr. Vance. All assets revert to their verified original ownership. Since all your assets were, in fact, my client's assets, you are left with exactly what you had when you met her. Julian's mind reeled back. 10 years ago, a failing startup, a $2,000 suit. You get nothing, Emma said. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. You are not entitled to the penthouse because I bought it with Ethelred funds. You are not entitled to the Hamptons house, or the cars, or the art. You are, per the moral turpitude clause you violated last night, not even entitled to a severance. She finally turned her gaze to Sophia. Sophia, who had been frozen in horror, visibly recoiled. And you, Miss Dubois, Emma said, her voice dropping to an arctic whisper. You thought you were sleeping with the king. You were sleeping with a middle manager, a very, very well-paid middle manager, but a clerk, nonetheless. I will sue you, Sophia shrieked. Wrongful termination, harassment. Please do, Arthur Graves chimed in, handing her a second envelope. This is a copy of the criminal complaint we are filing with the SEC, detailing your conspiracy to use Mr. Vance's revoked authority to defraud the parent company. I believe the term is wire fraud. And this, he handed her a tablet, is the security footage from Julian's office, where you are authorizing the use of corporate funds for your Legacy Project media campaign. A campaign that was, in fact, a PR blitz for your personal relationship. I believe my fossil of a legal team will quite enjoy discovery. Sophia looked at the evidence, then at Emma. She saw no mercy. She saw no anger. She saw nothing, just the black, cold void of a problem being solved. Sophia dropped the tablet. She turned and ran, her heels clacking on the marble, out of the building and out of their lives. Now, it was just Julian and Emma. Emma, he pleaded, his voice breaking. He held his hands out. Baby, please, I didn't know. It was a mistake. A test. It was a stupid mistake. It was, Emma agreed. Your mistake was thinking I was an accessory. I was never the accessory, Julian. I was the architect. She stepped past him. You can't just leave me with nothing, he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. After 10 years, I loved you. I worked for you. Emma paused, her back to him. She turned her head just slightly. No, Julian. You didn't work for me. You worked for my company. And your performance has been found lacking. Security. The Ethelred guards, who had been waiting patiently, stepped forward. They each took one of Julian's arms. This is assault, he screamed, as they began to physically drag him toward the revolving doors. I'm Julian Vance. You can't do this to me. I'll tell the press. Emma, please. Emma watched as the man who had been the King of New York was unceremoniously dumped on the sidewalk of the building that used to bear his name. The Vance capital sign high above them was already being prepped for removal. She turned to Arthur Graves. Mr. Graves, have the sign taken down by noon, and let's rebrand. I'm partial to my father's original name. Blackwood Innovations, Graves said, with the hint of a smile. It has a certain integrity. Yes, Emma said, walking toward the elevator. It does. I'll be in my office. The elevator doors chimed, and Emma Vance, Emma Blackwood, ascended to her throne. The day after the lobby confrontation was not just a news story, it was a seismic event. The city, which had feasted on the story of the scandalous kiss, was now served a far richer, more complex, and infinitely more satisfying meal. The New York Post, having scrambled to pull its vamp story, now blared a headline that would become iconic. The king is dead. Long live the queen. How Silent Wife, Emma Blackwood, built and destroyed an empire. The story was everywhere. It wasn't just a tabloid sensation, it was a financial earthquake. The Wall Street Journal ran a sober, stunned analysis titled The Ethelred Ghost, How Vance Capital was a 10-year, 10B decoy. Forbes, which had put Julian's face on its cover only a month prior, rushed out a digital issue. The stealth billionaire, Emma Blackwood, just taught a masterclass in corporate governance. The narrative, once a simple tale of a foolish wife and a cheating husband, was instantly rewritten. Emma was not the wronged woman. She was the architect, the phantom, the ice queen. Feminist blogs and financial gurus alike lionized her. Vogue ran a think piece titled The Power of the Pantsuit, analyzing her walk into the lobby as a declaration of war and a new uniform for the woman who has had enough. She was, in an instant, not just powerful, but a global symbol of quiet, terrifying competence. But while the world was reading about the new queen, the old court was in ruins. Julian Vance had not slept. He wasn't at the penthouse. His key fob hadn't even worked in the elevator. He wasn't at a 5-star hotel. His Amex Centurion card, his black card, his identity, had been declined with a quiet, digital beep of finality. He was in a sterile, $250 a-night room at a Midtown Holiday Inn, a room he'd paid for with the last of the cash in his wallet. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, the cheap comforter scratching his skin, watching his own execution on CNN. He saw Emma, in that black pantsuit, striding into his lobby. He saw himself, a madman being dragged out, his face a mask of crimson, screaming his own name like a curse. "It's a lie," he muttered, the remote in his hand. He clicked to Fox Business. A panel was dissecting the Event Horizon clause. "It's a brilliant, brutal piece of legal work," one analyst said. "He violated the morality clause in front of the entire world. She didn't just divorce him, she fired him." "It's theft," Julian roared at the screen. "It's my company. I built it." He grabbed his phone. His contacts. They were all there. The most powerful men and women in New York. He would fight this. He would build an army. He called David Meacham, his personal lawyer, the shark, who had drafted the prenup. "Julian!" David's voice was clipped, nervous. I can't talk." "What do you mean you can't talk?" Julian yelled. "She's stealing it. She's stealing everything. We're suing her. We're suing Ethelred. We're taking her to the cleaners. You said the prenup was ironclad." It is, Julian," Meacham said, his voice dropping. "It protects verified original ownership. And, Julian, I've seen the incorporation documents. They were just sent over by Ethelred's counsel. You don't have any original ownership. You were a CEO, a W-2 employee. You founded Vance Capital as a 100% subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. Julian, she funded your startup. It was always hers." The phone felt slick in Julian's hand. No, that's not... We... And Julian, Meacham said, the final nail. "I can no longer represent you. Your retainer agreement was with Vance Capital. Since you are no longer an agent of that company, and, frankly, since Ethelred's council has sent a cease and desist to my entire firm. We're dropping you. Conflict of interest. Goodbye, Julian." The line went dead. He tried others. His friends from the club, his rivals on the board. No one picked up. Voicemails. "User not found." He was an unperson. He was radioactive, a primal scream of rage and terror built in his chest. He threw the phone. It shattered against the wall, opposite a generic, framed print of a rowboat. He had one last card, one last, desperate play. He used the hotel phone to call the only person who would still profit from his misery, the gossip columnist from the Post who had been at the gala. 2 hours later, they were in the hotel's dim, empty bar. The columnist, a man named Marcus, nursed a club soda, a small recorder on the table. "She's a monster," Julian spat, his hands shaking. He hadn't shaved. "She's a black widow. She planned this. For 10 years. She's inhuman. She let me build it, just to take it away. She's the one who had the affair, you know. With Graves. I'm sure of it." Marcus just nodded, his eyes gleaming. "This is good, Julian. This is gold. The Ice Queen's betrayal. Keep talking." "I'm talking," Julian said, leaning in. "About my story. My book. My movie. I'll tell everyone the truth." "I'm afraid you won't be, Mr. Vance." A new voice, calm and cold, cut through the bar. Julian and Marcus turned. A young man in a perfectly tailored, uncreased suit stood there. He looked about 25, but his eyes were ancient. He worked for Arthur Graves. "Who the hell are you?" Julian snapped. The young man didn't answer. He simply placed a single, folded document on the table in front of Julian and tapped it. "What is this?" Julian unfolded it. "That," the young lawyer said, "is Appendix F, Section 3, of your CEO employment contract, the non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. It is comprehensive. It states, in short, that you may not discuss Ethelred Holdings, Blackwood Innovations, or any member of its board, which includes Emma Blackwood, in any public or private forum for perpetuity." "Or what?" Julian scoffed, though his heart was hammering. "Or," the lawyer said, "you will be liable for liquidated damages to the sum of, and I quote, $1,500,000,000. My firm has been instructed to monitor all media outlets. If a single word of Mr. Vance's story appears in print, we will file the suit, and we will win. We always do." The lawyer looked at Marcus. "And you, sir, you are now a party to a potential tortious interference. I would advise you to delete that recording." Marcus, who had faced down angry celebrities and mob lawyers, fumbled with his recorder and hit delete. He was terrified. "Good day, gentlemen." The young lawyer turned and left. Julian stared at the paper. It was a prison. He wasn't just ruined. He was silenced. He had no money, no company, no friends, and not even a story to sell. He was a ghost. He had been completely and totally erased. Sophia Dubois, on the other hand, was not the type to be erased. She was a fighter. She was a vamp. And she was, in her own mind, the real victim. She had spent 48 hours burning through her remaining credit lines, assembling a dream team of lawyers. She was suing for wrongful termination, sexual harassment. Emma created a hostile environment and emotional distress. She was going to own Emma Blackwood. Her day in court, or rather, a sterile deposition room, came 3 weeks later. She walked in wearing a dark, modest suit, her fiery hair pulled back. She was playing the part of the serious, wronged professional. Emma was not there. Of course not. Only Arthur Graves, flanked by his new, young associate. "Ms. Dubois?" Graves began, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Let's not waste time. You allege wrongful termination." I was the top-performing executive at Vance Capital, Sophia said, her voice clear and practiced. I was fired out of personal spite by a jealous, unhinged woman. An unhinged woman who, as sole stakeholder, had every right to dissolve the board and clean house, Graves countered. But let's talk about your performance. Were you, or were you not, in a sexual relationship with your direct superior, CEO Julian Vance? My personal life is not relevant. It is, Graves said, sliding a file across the table. When you use that personal life to defraud the company. This is a copy of the SEC complaint we filed yesterday. Let's turn to Exhibit AR. He produced a printout. This is your corporate Amex statement. On it, you billed, let's see, a custom red Carolina Herrera gown for $14,000. The description you filed with accounting was client entertainment and networking. Ms. Dubois, who were you entertaining? Sophia's face paled. Julian. Julian approved all my expenses. Which brings us to Exhibit B. Graves continued, relentless. A wire transfer, authorized by you, for $250,000 from the Legacy Project marketing budget. This money was sent to Sophia PR, a shell company incorporated in Delaware, and owned by your sister. That was for a media blitz. A media blitz, Graves said, sliding over a copy of the Post with the kiss. That seems to have been highly focused on your personal brand, not the company's. This, Miss Dubois, is wire fraud. It's conspiracy. This isn't a wrongful termination suit. This is a pre-trial hearing for a criminal case. Your criminal case. Sophia stared. The fight was gone. She was trapped. Now, Graves said, leaning back, my client, Miss Blackwood, is generous. She finds this all very distasteful. She is willing to drop the criminal charges and not pursue you for the full amount of the assets you stole. I didn't steal. On the condition, Graves continued, as if she hadn't spoken, that you drop this frivolous lawsuit, sign a full, binding confession, and agree to the same non-disclosure agreement as Mr. Vance. Sophia's face crumpled. So I get nothing? Oh, not at all, Graves said. You get to stay out of a federal prison. The final ignominious end for Sophia Dubois didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened a month later, in a Starbucks in Weehawken. Her lawsuits were gone, her reputation shredded. The misappropriated assets lawsuit had bankrupted her. She was trying to buy a $6 latte. Declined, the barista said, not looking up. What? No, try it again, Sophia snapped. It's a new card. The barista sighed, ran it again. Declined. Again. Do you have cash? Do you know who I am? Sophia shrieked, the pressure of the last month exploding. I ran a billion-dollar company. This is ridiculous. A teenager in line behind her, smelling a Karen moment, started filming on his phone. Mom, I just need $6.50, the barista said. I am Sophia Dubois. I will have your job. The video, titled Billionaire's Mistress Has Starbucks Meltdown, had 10 million views by midnight. She was not just ruined. She was a meme. She was a joke. While the old guard was self-destructing, the new queen was building. Emma Blackwood's first act as chairwoman of the rebranded Blackwood Innovations was not to celebrate, but to tear down. She stood in the grand, opulent boardroom, Julian's throne room, with the architects of the Legacy Project. Madam Chairwoman, Ms. Blackwood. The lead architect, a nervous man named Peterson, began. Here are the revised plans for the spire. As Mr. Vance requested, it will be the tallest residential structure in the Western Hemisphere. A 20,000-square-foot penthouse. Private. Stop, Emma said. Her voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. But you can throw these away." The architects looked at each other in horror. "But, Madam Chairwoman, this is 4 years of work." "It was 4 years of work on the wrong project," Emma said, walking to the giant model of the phallic, glittering tower. This is a monument to one man's ego. I'm not interested in ego. I'm interested in a legacy." She turned to the stunned team. "We are redesigning. From scratch. The spire is gone. We are not building a private club for billionaires. We are building a community." She pointed to the base of the model. "This half. This will be converted into 1,000 units of state-of-the-art, dignified, low-income and middle-class housing. This private park?" She flicked a tiny, gold-plated model tree. "It's now a public park. And this space, this will be a new, fully funded STEM school for the district." "But, Miss Blackwood," Peterson stammered, the profits, the margins on this design are razor thin. Mr. Vance's design was obscene," Emma offered. "Don't worry about the margins, Mr. Peterson. Worry about the skyline. My father believed that a company's health was tied to the health of the city it lived in. We are not just building apartments. We are investing in the city. Now, can your team handle that? Or shall I find one that can?" Peterson, seeing the steel in her eyes, suddenly felt a rush of inspiration he hadn't felt in years. "Yes," he said, standing straighter. "Yes, Miss Blackwood. We can." "Good," Emma said. "I want new blueprints on my desk in a week." When the story of the new legacy project broke, the city, which was already in her corner, fell in love. She wasn't just a cold-blooded corporate raider. She was a visionary. She was, as one columnist put it, the billionaire we didn't know we needed. 3 months later, autumn in New York, the giant, garish Vance capital letters had been scrubbed from the building. In their place, in elegant, brushed steel, were the words, "Blackwood Innovations." Emma stood in her office, the office she had, in fact, always owned. The heavy dark mahogany and leather were gone, replaced by light woods, glass, and a breathtaking collection of modern art. The room was no longer a tomb of ego. It was a hub of light and air. Arthur Graves walked in, not bothering to knock. That was their way. "Madam Chairwoman," he said. He still called her that, but there was a warmth to it now. "Arthur," she replied, turning from the window. "The first quarter projections are in." He handed her a tablet. "It seems the market has a taste for integrity. We're up 30% over Vance Capital's best-ever quarter. The new legacy project has secured 3 massive institutional partners. The city is ecstatic." "Good," Emma said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "And one final piece of administrative news," Graves said, a rare, sly look in his eye. "Oh? You'll recall we are putting the Blackwood Foundation's first annual gala out for catering bids. We've received several. And? A call came in this morning. A very persistent sales representative from a new vendor. Monarch Catering Supplies. Based in Queens." Emma's smile didn't waver, but her eyes, for a moment, were ice. "Go on." "The representative," Graves continued, "was a Mr. Julian Vance. He was extremely insistent on speaking directly to you, to make the sale personally. He said he had a long-standing relationship with the principal." Emma was silent for a moment, looking down at the city she now so visibly helped to lead. She thought of the man screaming in her lobby. She thought of the man who had kissed his mistress for the world to see. And now she thought of the man on the phone, in a cheap suit, trying to sell her cocktail napkins. "And what did you tell him, Arthur?" she asked, her voice soft. "I informed Mr. Vance that all vendor communication must go through procurement," Graves said, his voice flat. "I also advised him that, given his familiarity with the company's principal, any further direct contact might be viewed as a conflict of interest, or perhaps harassment." "And the bid?" Emma asked. "Competitive on a per-unit basis," Graves said, with the slightest shrug. "But I've been informed the quality of their napkins is, to put it mildly, subpar. We will, of course, be declining." Emma finally laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was real, and it was warm, and it filled the entire office. "Thank you, Arthur. That's all. Madam Chairwoman." He left her alone. Emma Blackwood turned back to the window. The weight of the diamonds was gone. The weight of the gowns was gone. The weight of the name Vance was a distant, bitter-tasting memory. All that was left was the crown. It was heavy. It was hers. And she, for the first time in her life, realized she had been born to wear it. And just like that, the empire built on arrogance was brought down by the woman who laid the first stone. Emma Vance, Emma Blackwood, didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She reminded the world that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Julian and Sophia thought they were taking over the company, but they were just employees, and they'd just been served the ultimate pink slip. What did you think of Emma's ultimate power move? Was Julian's downfall satisfying, or did he get what he deserved? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, karma, and sweet, sweet revenge, please make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We post new real-life drama stories every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Share this video with a friend who needs to see that the best revenge is owning it all. Thanks for listening.